The fluorescent lights of orbital station Kepler 7 flickered as Kim Taeyong pushed his cleaning cart through the lower commercial sectors. At 42 years old, he had worked as a sanitation technician for nearly 15 years, maintaining the grime and waste systems that kept humanity's largest space station functioning. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and Taeyong took pride in doing it well. The graveyard shift suited him perfectly. Fewer people meant fewer judgmental stares at the man who cleaned their messes. Most nights, he worked completely alone in the huge waste disposal area where cargo containers and trash from 1,000 different worlds piled up before being processed. He knew every corner of this place, every sound the machines made, every smell that came from different types of alien refuse. Tonight started like any other night. Taeyong hummed an old Korean song his mother used to sing as he emptied trash bins and cleaned floors. The work was repetitive, almost meditative. His mind wandered to thoughts of dinner, maybe watching an old Earth movie before sleeping. Then he heard something that made him stop completely. A soft whimpering sound barely rose above the constant hum of the recycling machines. Taeyong froze, tilted his head to listen more carefully. There was again. It sounded like a small animal, hurt and scared. He abandoned his cleaning cart immediately and followed the sound. His heart started beating faster. In 15 years, he had found many strange things in the waste areas, contraband goods, illegal weapons, even stolen artwork once. But he had never heard anything alive down here before. The whimpering led him to a narrow gap between 2 massive waste containers. Taeyong pulled out his flashlight and shined it into the darkness. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. A child sat huddled in the corner, tiny and trembling with fear. She could not have been more than 3 years old, but this was not a human child. Her skin had a strange crystalline texture and was dull gray in color. Her large eyes, silver with hints of violet, stared up at him filled with pure terror. She wore torn clothing that looked expensive once, and her small hands clutched something broken. Taeyong recognized her species immediately. He had seen them before on the station, Valtherans, tall and elegant beings whose skins shimmered with beautiful shifting colors. They were one of the most important species in the galaxy, known for their ability to speak mind to mind without words. Everyone knew about Valtherans. They were proud, powerful, and wealthy. But this child's skin did not shimmer at all. It was flat, lifeless gray. And she did not try to speak into his mind the way Valtherans normally did. Taeyong's hands shook as he knelt down slowly. He did not want to frighten her more than she already was. "Hey there, little one," he said softly in Korean, then switched to basic galactic common that most species understood. "It's okay. I won't hurt you. I promise." The child whimpered again and pressed herself harder into the corner. She was so thin he could see her bones through her skin. Scratches and bruises covered her small body. Fresh blood stained her torn clothes. Someone had hurt this child badly. Or worse, someone had left her here to die alone in the dark. Taeyong felt anger rise in his chest. What kind of monster would do this to a baby? "I'm going to help you," he whispered, reaching out very slowly with gentle hands. "You're safe now. I've got you." The child flinched when he touched her, but was too weak to pull away. Carefully, so carefully, Taeyong lifted the tiny girl into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, far too light for her size. He quickly wrapped his work jacket around her small, shaking body to keep her warm. "Let's get you somewhere safe," he murmured, holding her close to his chest. Taeyong's mind raced as he carried her through the empty corridors. He could not take her to the medical bay. They would ask too many questions he could not answer. They would call the authorities, start investigations, and probably hand her over to Valtran officials. Given her obvious disability and the fact that someone had abandoned her to die, Taeyong had a very bad feeling about what would happen to her then. No, he would not let them take this child. She had been thrown away once already. He would not let it happen again. Instead, Taeyong took her to his home, a cramped studio apartment in the residential sector where lower-wage workers lived. It was not much, just a sleeping pod, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, and one small window showing the stars beyond. but was clean and warm and safe. He laid the child gently on his sleeping pod and looked at her more carefully under proper light. The broken object she held so tightly was a piece of jewelry, beautiful metalwork with precious stones, though half of it was missing. It seemed very important to her, so he did not try to take it away. The child stared at him with those huge, luminous eyes, still terrified but now also showing a tiny spark of hope. Taeyong smiled at her. "First things first. Let's get some food in you, okay?" 10 years had passed since that night in the waste disposal area. Kim Taeyong was 52 now, his hair graying at the temples, but his eyes still held the same gentle warmth they always had. Hannah had grown into a remarkable young woman of 13. Though her skin remained the dull gray of a telepathically silent Valthrin, she had developed her own unique gifts. She could read emotions through the tiniest facial expressions, body language, and vocal tones with uncanny accuracy. What she lacked in telepathy, she made up for in profound empathy. She had become fluent in 17 languages, both human and alien. Technology came naturally to her brilliant mind. After school each day, she often helped Taeyong with his work, reprogramming cleaning robots and making the waste systems run better and faster. Their small apartment had become a real home over the years. Drawings Hannah made as a child still decorated the walls. Books in multiple languages covered every available surface. A small collection of plants grew near their single window, something Hannah tended carefully each morning before school. One evening, Hannah sat at their tiny table doing homework on her datapad when she suddenly looked up at Taeyong. Her silver-violet eyes studied his face with intense focus. "Appa, you're worried about something," she said quietly. Taeyong was preparing their dinner, chopping vegetables for soup. He smiled at her, though the smile did not quite reach his eyes. "Just tired, sweetheart. Long day at work." Hannah set down her stylus and crossed her arms. "You're lying. Your left eye twitches when you lie. It always has. What's really wrong?" Taeyong sighed deeply. His daughter was too perceptive for her own good sometimes. He put down the knife and sat across from her at the table. "There's a Valthrin diplomatic vessel docked at the station," he said slowly. "It arrived 3 days ago. This morning, I saw some of their guards in the lower sectors. They were showing people holographic images and asking questions." Hannah's expression did not change, but her hands became very still on her datapad. Questions about what? A missing child from 13 years ago. Taeyong reached across the table and took her hand gently. "Hannah, I think someone might be looking for you." The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Hannah stared at their joined hands for a long moment before speaking. "Will they take me away from you?" Her voice was small, like when she was little. "Not if I can help it," Taeyong said firmly. "You're legally registered as my ward under human law. They cannot just take you. But," he hesitated, choosing his words carefully, "that broken jewelry you had when I found you, I've kept it safe all these years. I think it might be important. I think we need to find out who you really are and where you came from." "I know who I am," Hannah said softly, looking up at him. "I'm your daughter." "You'll always be my daughter," Taeyong promised, squeezing her hand. "Always and forever. Nothing will ever change that. But the universe is bigger than just us. And if someone's been looking for you for 13 years, never giving up, never stopping their search, we need to know why. We need to know the truth." Hannah was quiet for another long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "You're right. I need to know. Even if the truth is scary, not knowing is worse." Over the next week, they worked together in secret. Hannah used her considerable technical skills to access station records and quietly intercept communications between the Valthrin vessel and station authorities. Taeyong used his network of friends among the station workers, janitors, mechanics, servers, all the people that others overlooked and ignored, to gather information and rumors. What they discovered shocked them both completely. The jewelry piece was not just expensive. It was a royal family heirloom, worn only by members of the imperial bloodline. And the missing child the Valthrin guards were searching for was not just any child. She was Princess Kaelin, the only daughter of Empress Nari of the Valthrin Imperium, one of the most powerful rulers in the known galaxy. Hannah stared at the holographic records displayed on her datapad, her face pale. That can't be right. Why would an empress abandon her own child? It makes no sense. Taeyong had dug deeper into archived news feeds from 13 years ago. He pulled up an old article and showed it to her. Look at this. Princess Kaylin was born with a genetic condition that prevented telepathic development. According to Valtran tradition, the royal family's right to rule comes from their psychic strength. The noble houses demanded that the baby be eliminated. Killed, Hannah said flatly, understanding immediately. They wanted to kill a baby because she was different. Yes, Taeyong said, his voice heavy with sadness. But look at this death certificate dated 3 days after the birth. It says the princess died of natural causes. Hannah's brilliant mind pieced the puzzle together quickly. She faked my death. The Empress faked my death to save my life. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched the screen. But then why was I abandoned in a waste disposal area? What went wrong? I don't know, Taeyong admitted. Maybe someone was supposed to take you somewhere safe. Maybe they panicked or were discovered. Maybe something went terribly wrong with the plan. But somehow you ended up alone and I found you. Hannah stood abruptly and began pacing their small apartment, her mind working fast. If I come forward now, I become a threat to their political system. The nobles who wanted me dead 13 years ago will still want me dead today. Nothing has changed. But your mother has been searching for you all this time, Taeyong pointed out gently. Very carefully, very secretly, but she never stopped looking. That has to mean something. That has to mean she loves you. Hannah stopped pacing and looked at her father. You think I should reveal myself. You think I should meet her. I think you deserve to know the truth about where you came from, Taeyong said carefully. You deserve to meet your birth mother and hear her story. And maybe, just maybe, you can show them all that their definition of worth and value is completely wrong. Hannah walked to the window and stared out at the stars for a long time. Finally, she turned back to Taeyong with determination in her eyes. You taught me that I have value exactly as I am, she said. That being different doesn't mean being broken. Maybe it's time I taught the Valthran Empire that same lesson. The meeting was arranged through careful intermediaries. Taeyong insisted it happen in neutral territory, a private conference room in Kepler-7's diplomatic sector, under human jurisdiction and security. Empress Nari arrived with minimal escort, just 2 guards and an advisor. Taeyong had expected someone imposing and cold, maybe even cruel. Instead, the woman who entered the room looked exhausted, with hope and fear fighting for control of her expression. She was tall like all Valthrans, with skin that shimmered in deep blues and purples. Her elaborate robes marked her high status, covered in symbols of power and authority. But her eyes, the same silver violet as Hannah's, were fixed entirely on the young girl sitting beside Taeyong. Kaylin! The Empress's voice broke on the name like glass shattering. Hannah stood slowly from her chair. My name is Hannah, she said quietly but firmly. But I believe I was Kaylin once, a very long time ago. The Empress took 1 step forward, then stopped suddenly, as if afraid that moving too fast would make Hannah disappear like smoke. You're alive. You're really alive. I've searched for 13 years. I never stopped looking. Never stopped hoping and praying I would find you. You abandoned me, Hannah said. She did not sound angry or accusatory, just stating a simple fact. Tears began streaming down Empress Nari's face, unusual display of raw emotion for a Valthran ruler. I tried to save you, she said, her voice shaking. The noble houses demanded your execution. You were only 3 days old, and they wanted you dead because you couldn't speak mind to mind like other Valthrans. I couldn't let them kill my baby. I couldn't. She moved closer, her hands trembling at her sides. I faked your death. I arranged for my most trusted operative to take you to a distant colony world where Valthran culture held no power, where you could live freely without shame or danger. But something went terribly wrong. He disappeared with you completely. I've spent 13 years searching every corner of the galaxy, terrified you were dead, desperately hoping you were somehow alive. Hannah's carefully controlled expression wavered for the first time. I was in a waste disposal area. starving, injured, bleeding. If Appa hadn't found me by pure chance, I would have died there alone in the dark. Empress Nari turned to Taeyong. To a complete shock, she bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect that made her guard stiffen in alarm. Empresses did not bow to anyone, especially not to common workers. You saved my daughter's life, Nari said, still bowing. You gave her something I couldn't provide, safety, love, a real childhood. I owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid, not in 1,000 lifetimes. I don't want payment or rewards, Taeyong said firmly, standing to face her. I only want Hannah to be safe and happy. That's all I've ever wanted since the moment I found her. Then we share the same goal, Nari said, straightening. She turned back to Hannah with desperate hope in her eyes. I won't force you to return to the Valtharan homeworld. I won't claim you as my daughter if you don't wish it. But please, I'm begging you, let me know you. Let me try to be your mother, even though I failed you terribly before. Hannah looked at Taeyong. He gave her a small nod, silently giving her permission to make her own choice without pressure from him. I'll meet with you, Hannah said finally. I'll talk with you and listen to your story. But I need you to understand something first. I'm not broken. I'm not defective or damaged. I'm different, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If I'm going to be part of your world, even a small part, that world needs to change its thinking. Empress Nari smiled through her tears, and for a moment she looked years younger. You sound exactly like I hoped you would. Strong, brave, confident, perfect exactly as you are. The next days passed in a blur of activity. DNA testing confirmed what they all already knew in their hearts. Hannah was indeed Princess Kaelin. News spread to the Valtharan Imperium like wildfire jumping from tree to tree. The dead princess was alive. Political chaos erupted immediately across Valtharan space. The noble houses divided into angry factions. Some supported Empress Nari and her returned daughter. Others claimed loudly that Hannah's disability made her completely unfit for any royal role. Still others saw a golden opportunity to destabilize the throne entirely and seize power for themselves. The first assassination attempt came within 48 hours of the announcement. Taeyong and Hannah were in their small quarters on the station, packing belongings and discussing their options, when the door suddenly exploded inward with tremendous force. A Valtharan assassin dressed all in black moved with inhuman speed, a deadly energy blade raised high, and aimed directly at Hannah's chest. Taeyong threw himself in front of his daughter without thinking, without hesitation. But the blade never connected with either of them. Royal guards materialized seemingly from nowhere, moving even faster than the assassin. They cut him down before his weapon could strike. The assassin collapsed to the floor, dead before he hit the ground. We're not safe here anymore, Taeyong said, holding Hannah close as she shook with adrenaline and shock and fear. We can't stay on this station. No, you cannot. Agreed Captain Lee Salmon, head of Hannah's newly assigned security detail. She was a stern-faced woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. The princess needs to be moved to a secure location immediately. Empress Nari requests that you both come to the Imperial Palace on Valterra Prime as soon as possible. Both of us. Taeyong asked, surprised. The princess refuses to go anywhere without you, Salmon said with the tiniest hint of a smile. And the Empress completely supports her decision. You're being officially appointed as the princess's personal advisor and guardian. We're still working out your exact title and responsibilities, but you'll have full access to her at all times. Hannah gripped Taeyong's hand tightly. I'm not doing any of this without you, Appa. I need you with me. I can't face this alone. He looked down at this brave, brilliant girl, his daughter, whether or not she was also a princess. Then I'm with you, every single step of the way. Valterra Prime was breathtaking. The Valtharan homeworld glowed with bioluminescent forests and crystalline cities that caught the light of 3 moons. The Imperial Palace rose from a mountain peak, all soaring spires and graceful architecture that seemed to defy gravity. Taeyong felt profoundly out of place. He was a janitor from a space station, now walking halls where empresses and nobles had ruled for millennia. His simple clothing looked shabby next to the elaborate robes everyone else wore. But Hannah walked beside him with her head held high, and that gave him strength and courage. The official presentation to the imperial court was scheduled for the following week. Until then, Empress Nari requested private time with her daughter. Taeyong gave him space to talk and reconnect, though he stayed nearby in case Hannah needed him. Their relationship developed slowly, carefully, like two people learning to walk on ice. Nari was trying desperately to rebuild 13 lost years. Hannah was trying to reconcile the mother who had saved her life with the mother who had given her away. Both were trying to heal old, deep wounds while navigating dangerous political storms all around them. "She's not what I expected," Hannah told Taeyong one evening. They were in his assigned quarters, ridiculously luxurious by his standards, with multiple rooms and a balcony overlooking the glowing forest below. "What did you expect?" Taeyong asked gently. "Someone cold, distant, someone who would see me as a political problem to solve rather than a daughter." Hannah sat beside him on the balcony railing. "But she's sad, Appa. She's been sad for 13 years, mourning me, searching desperately for me, never giving up hope. She really loves me. I can see it in every look, every word. That doesn't make what happened hurt any less," Taeyong said gently. "No," Hannah agreed, shaking her head. "But it makes everything more complicated. I can be angry about being abandoned and still understand why she did it. I can hurt and still choose to forgive her eventually." She looked at him with wise eyes. "You taught me that. You showed me that people are complicated. That love sometimes means making impossible choices with no good options." The week passed quickly. Empress Nari offered Taeyong titles, estates, and wealth beyond his wildest imagination. He refused everything except a modest salary and the right to remain at Hannah's side. "I don't want your money or your titles," he told the Empress during one private meeting. "I just want Hannah to be happy and safe. And I want her to have complete freedom to choose her own future, whatever that might be." Nari studied him for a long moment with calculating eyes. "You're an unusual man, Kim Taeyong. Most people would take everything offered and demand even more. Most people didn't find a dying child in a waste disposal area and realize that life is about more than accumulating things and status," Taeyong replied quietly. "Hannah taught me what really matters in this universe. Love, family, doing what's right even when it's hard. She's incredibly lucky to have you," Nari said softly. "And so am I. You kept my daughter alive when I couldn't. You helped her become someone truly extraordinary. That's worth more than all the treasures of my entire empire." The day of the court presentation finally arrived. Hundreds of Valtharan nobles filled the grand hall, their skin shimmering in every color imaginable like a rainbow made flesh. Hannah stood before them in formal robes, her dull gray skin a stark and shocking contrast to their brilliant colors. The whispers started immediately, echoing through the enormous chamber. "Defective, broken, unworthy, not one of us." Lord Minwo, leader of the conservative noble faction, stood to speak. He was old and powerful, his skin flashing angry reds and oranges. "With all respect to Her Imperial Majesty, we cannot accept this individual as heir to the throne. She lacks the fundamental abilities that define our people. She is Valtharan in body alone, nothing more. I am Valtharan in body," Hannah said clearly, her voice carrying through the hall with surprising strength. "But I am also human in spirit, raised by a man who taught me that worth isn't measured by what you can or cannot do. It's measured by what you choose to do with whatever abilities you have." She walked forward into the center of the hall, unafraid despite hundreds of hostile eyes watching her every move. "You call me defective because I can't speak mind to mind, but I can speak with words that any species in the galaxy understands. You call me broken because I can't sense thoughts, but I can read emotions in ways you've forgotten, through expressions and gestures and the universal language of compassion that crosses all barriers." "This is complete nonsense," Lord Minwo snapped angrily. "You cannot rule an empire without telepathy. You cannot understand or lead your own people properly." "Can I?" Hannah turned to face him directly. "Your skin shows confidence, Lord Minwo, shimmering golds and reds. But your hands tremble slightly. Your eyes keep darting to the eastern balcony, where 3 nobles from your faction are standing and watching. You're afraid. Not of me. You're afraid of them. They're pressuring you to take a much harder stance than you personally prefer, aren't they? Minwo's colors flickered and changed erratically. Shocked murmurs rippled through the assembled nobles like waves. Hannah had just exposed private political maneuvering without reading a single thought. I may not be telepathic, Hannah continued, addressing the entire court now, but I see what others miss completely. I understand alien species you've dismissed as lesser and inferior. I can bridge different worlds you've kept separate for centuries. That's not weakness. That's a different kind of strength, one this empire desperately needs. From his position near the throne, Taeyong watched with pride threatening to burst from his chest. The noble houses demanded my death as an infant because I didn't fit your narrow definition of perfection, Hannah said, her voice ringing with conviction. But perhaps your definition is what needs to change. Perhaps an empire built on accepting only one type of mind, one way of being, is actually weaker than one that values all types of thinking and ability. Empress Nari stood from her throne, her colors blazing with fierce protective love. My daughter speaks wisdom beyond her years. The noble houses will debate her status as heir through proper channels. But know this and know it well. She is Princess Kaelin, daughter of the Imperial House, and she is under my personal protection. Any who threaten her threaten me directly. That night, another assassination attempt came, this time poisoning Hannah's food. Caught only by the vigilant tasters. Then a rigged shuttle. Then hired mercenaries who breached the outer palace walls. But Hannah was learning, growing stronger, and the Empire was beginning to listen. 5 years had passed since Hannah's dramatic return to Valterra Prime. She was now 18, officially recognized as Crown Princess and heir to the Valthran Imperium. The girl who'd been left to die in a waste disposal area now walked the halls of power with grace and authority. But more importantly, she had begun to change the Empire itself. The Disability Rights Act had been her first major legislative victory, protecting all Valthrans born with physical or mental differences. Medical care, education access, and anti-discrimination laws now protected those who had previously been abandoned or hidden away in shame by their families. Taeyong, now bearing the formal title of Imperial Advocate for Interspecies Relations, watched Hannah negotiate a complex trade agreement with 3 different alien species. She moved between languages effortlessly, reading the room with her unique empathetic abilities, finding common ground where telepathic Valthrans had completely missed crucial emotional signals. She had been right all those years ago. Her differences were not weaknesses. They were strengths the Empire had been too blind to see. Your daughter is remarkable, said Ambassador Park Hyojin, a human diplomat who had become a close friend over the years. She's changing centuries of prejudice and discrimination, bit by bit. She's changing the entire galaxy, Taeyong said proudly, watching Hannah smile and bow respectfully to the alien delegates. Empress Nari, now in her 60s and considering retirement, had become Hannah's closest political ally and advisor. The relationship between mother and daughter had healed slowly but completely over 5 years. Nari had earned Hannah's forgiveness through unwavering support and unconditional love. You know something, Nari said to Taeyong during a private dinner one evening. I gave her life twice, once when I bore her into this world, and once when I sent her away to save her. But you gave her something I never could. You taught her how to actually live, how to be strong and compassionate. She taught me just as much, Taeyong replied honestly, probably more than I ever taught her. The crisis came suddenly and without warning. Lord Minwo, after 5 years of seeming compliance and acceptance, launched a final desperate coup attempt. Using an obscure ancient law buried deep in historical records, he challenged Hannah's legitimacy before the Grand Council. He claimed that her human upbringing had contaminated the royal bloodline and completely invalidated her right to rule Valthrans. The noble houses split immediately. Some supported Minwo and his traditionalist views. Others rallied firmly behind Hannah and her vision of change. The Empire teetered dangerously on the edge of civil war. The matter went before the Grand Council, a gathering of every major noble house that happened only once per generation to resolve constitutional crises. Thousands of nobles packed the enormous council chamber. Billions more across the empire watched through live broadcasts. Hannah stood alone in the center of the massive chamber, facing the assembled nobles. Taeyong desperately wanted to stand with her, but she had insisted on facing this final challenge by herself. Lord Minwo claims my human upbringing makes me unfit to rule, Hannah began, her voice steady and clear. He's partially correct. My upbringing was human. My father is human, and I'm profoundly grateful for that fact. Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber like thunder. If I had been raised here in the Imperial Palace, I would have learned to value only telepathy, only traditional power, only our own species above all others. Hannah continued firmly. Instead, my father taught me to value all beings equally, to see worth in the overlooked and forgotten, to measure success not by the abilities you're born with, but by the compassion and wisdom you choose to show every single day. She turned slowly, addressing the entire massive assembly. This empire has been built on a dangerously narrow definition of perfection. We've discarded our own children for being different. We've dismissed other species as inferior and worthless. We've mistaken uniformity for strength. But true strength comes from diversity, from different types of thinking, different abilities, different experiences, all working together. These are pretty words, Lord Minwo said coldly, his skin flashing angry colors. But words don't change ancient law. The codes are absolutely clear on this matter. The ancient codes, Hannah interrupted sharply, were written by people who believed might made right, who believed difference automatically meant defect and weakness. Those codes allowed my murder as an innocent infant. Those codes have caused immeasurable suffering across generations. And those codes are fundamentally wrong. She pulled out a datapad and projected documents into the air above the assembly for everyone to see. I propose a completely new imperial charter, one that recognizes all forms of intelligence and ability as equally valuable, one that protects the vulnerable instead of eliminating them, one that makes this empire a true coalition of equals, Valthrin and alien working together. The chamber erupted into chaos. Some nobles shouted passionate support. Others roared fierce opposition. The noise built and built until it seemed the very walls would crack from sound. Then Empress Nari stood, and her telepathic command instantly silenced thousands. My daughter proposes revolution. She asks us to question everything we believed about ourselves for centuries. And I support her completely and without reservation. Nari moved to stand beside Hannah, in the center of the chamber. 18 years ago, I made an impossible choice. Save my daughter or preserve tradition. I chose her life over your approval then. Today, I make that exact same choice again. If you cannot accept her vision for our future, then you cannot accept me as your empress. The nobles of the younger generation began standing one by one in support. Then others joined them. Then more and more. The tide was turning, flowing toward change. Lord Minwo saw his support crumbling away like sand. In desperate rage, he pulled a hidden weapon, a pulse blade that was completely illegal in the council chamber. Security guards moved to stop him, but they were positioned too far away. Time seemed to slow down. Minwo lunged directly toward Hannah, with murder in his eyes. Taeyong shouted from the observer's gallery. Empress Nari reached out with all her telepathic force, but could not stop the physical blade in time. Then Captain Lee Salmon materialized between Hannah and the descending blade, taking the vicious strike meant for the princess. She collapsed to the marble floor, and absolute chaos erupted throughout the chamber. Hannah dropped to her knees beside her fallen guard, hands pressed desperately against a terrible wound. Medical teams rushed forward with emergency equipment. Other guards subdued Minwo roughly, his political career ending in violence just as he had begun it, with hatred of those he deemed lesser. "Don't you die," Hannah commanded Salmon through tears. "Don't you dare die protecting me." "Worth it," Salmon whispered, blood on her lips. "You're changing the world, princess. Keep going." The medical team stabilized Salmon enough to rush her to emergency surgery. She would survive, though her injuries were severe and recovery would take months. The Grand Council, profoundly shaken by the violence they had witnessed, voted that same historic day.